All right, good. Almost afternoon, everybody. I know that for the sake of time, we're gonna. I know a couple folks will be dropping in, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. So today's topic for our volunteer development lunch and learn is going to be volunteer orientation. So if you joined us the last 2 months, we went through the ISOCHR model, identification, as well as selection. Moving on into volunteer orientation. And today we're going to be joined by Amanda Simmons. So she's got some great material for her volunteer leader training, her volunteer orientation that she's going to provide and present to us a little bit later into this session. So we're glad to have her today. So if you've just started participating in the Lunch and Learn, we do them every month. We do record them and put them on YouTube as well. So a lot of the materials that we produce during the call are things that you can take away and use in your parish program. We do incorporate activities throughout these sessions. So we talk about, the topic, and then we get together and actually create deliverables that we need for our parish programs. So if you've missed any of the previous sessions, I just encourage you to go back and either watch them or dig through some of those resources that we've been providing. So today's session, some of the objectives or learning objectives of today is just to define leader orientation, which is that process of orienting leaders for our program, providing them with those roles expectations, as well as providing information for our program staff, identifying those essential components of a successful leader orientation, then we're going to develop a working plan for our new leaders for a parish program that we get to select. So just a brief overview about volunteer orientation. So if you're familiar with ISOCHR, this is a component of the volunteer development model that we use in 4-H. Orientation should include an overview of the 4-H program. What is the mission? What is the goal of our organization? And then also a brief parish program overview as well, even some history programs that you've either implemented or looking to implement in your program. Also providing them with a summary of their position description, what's being expected of them, and the relationship that they're going to have with others. If you can offer your leaders an opportunity to meet other individuals within your program or through the state through that orientation, that's a very critical component that you can include as well. Other leaders that have been successful, they could even come in and teach some of those topics. And then orientation doesn't just start with that one training. It actually starts at that first contact. So I've seen agents that have been very successful at making parent orientation also a component of leader orientation, also a component of leader recruitment. So just think about those. When are you going to have an opportunity to connect with those leaders and providing them with that essential materials that they need? And then sometimes your very enthusiastic volunteers are some of the best people to help you with conducting these orientations. They're the ones that are on the front lines, understanding what it's like to be a volunteer in the program. So reaching out to them and giving them that critical role. Remember, we're talking about volunteer empowerment, giving our volunteers more leadership roles within our program. So that's one thing that you can look to implement when you're creating a successful volunteer orientation. So we know that orientation is necessary for preparing volunteers for their roles. And so if you joined us during the virtual conference just last year, we actually talked about how within the foundational literature in ISOCHR, there was this, wonderful image of how you increase authority of your volunteer leaders and provide them with those essential critical information. You actually get more participation out of the leader. So orientation is another way that you can provide those volunteers with the information they need to be successful. And volunteers reported that the primary causes for them being either disengaged or unenrolling from a position is just having a lack of information, as well as educational opportunities available to them. And so just to maximize their involvement, it's critical that we give them that essential material that we need. And they recognize that it's important. They want those orientation opportunities. They want the professional development, and they want that continuing education in order for them to be successful in their roles, but also because they're looking for, more autonomy and more leadership often when they're serving within our programs. So we have with us today, so Amanda is on the session today. She presented recently at the New Agent Orientation and did a really great job just talking about her leader orientation that she's created. And so, Amanda, I'm going to actually give it away to you now if you want to take a moment to pull up your slides. And she's going to run through what she does and in her program and that's been successful. And I'm very much appreciate you for doing this for us, Amanda. We really like to learn from our successful agents in the field when it comes to these topics.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I am going to try to share my screen.
No worries. I can watch your chat for you. I don't mind doing
all right. Okay, can y'all see it now?
Looks great.
You got it? Okay, good deal. Well, good morning. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. And yes, our 4-H volunteer leader orientation and training is something that one of the things in our parish that we're very proud of. And it's an exciting day for us. We get to visit with our leaders. But very first thing that I want to talk about, we're talking about the building blocks for 4-H volunteer leader orientation and some things that you need to think about to build a really great orientation for your volunteer leaders. And just kind of reiterating what Megan has shared with you all, just so that when you look at this, it's familiar to you, I know. With the volunteer isotour model, it is the model that we follow with managing our volunteers, and those different sections of that model is listed. But sometimes the reason why I wanted to put this slide up is because I wanted to put orientation and training right next to each other, because a lot of times we can think, well, that's the same thing, or that they're just so very similar that, why are they two separate sections? And as Megan had discussed just a little bit ago, there is a distinction between the two, and I just wanted for you all to be able to see that and know pretty much what the requirements were for each one, or what specifically you're going to want to make sure and cover in each of those that are directly different from the other. And so for orientation, first and foremost, it is not a training. It is a precursor to the training, and it pretty much is the first contact that you may have with your volunteer. As far as you and your staff goes, it's the primary reason for orientation should be distinct from training. It is that it and why it is distinct is that it gives both you and the volunteer another chance to make sure this is a good match for all involved before too much time and effort are put in and resources are invested into training. So orientation is an opportunity for the volunteer to learn the following key items: the organization's mission and vision, how the volunteer fits into the big picture, the roles and expertise of staff with whom the volunteer will be working, and the general culture, values, and norms of the organization. And I've got it right next to training so that you can see the difference between the two and differentiate between the two. And so looking at training, this is where you move more into the training with the leader, and that they have a say in what and how they learn. So you can ask them, when they're available for you to visit one-on-one, or, what their expectations are for training throughout the year. You need to have a goal, they need to feel what they're learning is relative to them. They need to be able to apply what they're learning quickly, and they need to feel respected. And so that just shows you the difference between the two, so that you can differentiate between those, because sometimes you think, well, they're the same thing. Well, not they're not. So but moving into building your orientation, it's good for you to think, when is the best time? The timing is important because you know, if you're wanting to have orientation with your school leaders, well, you're not going to want to do that in January because they'll be out there floundering from the beginning of school till January. So you want to make sure you're doing it at a time that's best for them. One thing that we do in our advisory meeting is we have our volunteers and volunteer leaders come. They're invited to our advisory, and we will ask them what they prefer as far as orientation and trainings and things like that. And that's where we came up with our date. They said that they, wanted to have it. We did have it in October according to the school system, and the leaders came back and said, well, we really need it earlier than that. Could we have it in September? And so we went to the school system and said, your leaders are asking for it to be held in September. And so they gave us a September date rather than October. And so you kind of have to work with everyone involved. School administration is very important when you're dealing with school leaders as volunteers. We are fortunate in that our school administration allows us a half a day of a school day to be able to hold our orientation, and then we begin our training on that day as well. And so the teacher leaders are able to leave the school and come to our training that day for a half a day. They get there at 11:30, and we feed them lunch, and then they have the rest of the day to spend with us with orientation. And like I said, we start in on our training information as well. Because we have that one day, we kind of combine orientation with training, and then we continue our training throughout the year at different times. Location is important. One thing that we noticed, that we worked with school administration and we actually held our orientation at the school board office in their meeting room. And so it kind of gave those new volunteers the idea of, this is very much supported by the school system. The school system really wants us to take part in this. The school system supports this, is behind this, because it is actually being held at the school board office. Now, we also have held these at our 4-H office, and that's a good thing too, because then they get to find where the 4-H office is and get familiar with the location of our office. So there's lots of positives to that as well. Excuse me. So be sure and think about your location. You do want a central location, and you want a location that's going to be easily accessible to all of your volunteers, and so be sure to consider that. Promotion of your orientation, you're going to want to make sure that you cover all of your bases when getting the information out to them. Again, talking to your school administration, we were able to send out a letter to all of the principals. We sent out a letter to all of the leaders, and within that letter, we put, our our assistant superintendent or superintendent, or whoever you may be in communication with, you put their name and say, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith is, considers this training or this orientation very important and supports these efforts. And so you can use their name within that letter, and that lets the leader know and lets the principal know that the school system is behind the actual orientation. So those are things to consider. Designing the environment. This is a copy of our actual agenda that we have for our orientation and training day. And we want to make sure that we're covering all of those goals that we have for the day and objectives. But you have to remember that you're dealing with volunteers, and you have to remember that you're dealing with teachers a lot of times. And so you want it to be relative. You want it to relate to them, and you want it to be relative to what they do every day. And so you want to try to make sure that you're giving them things that are things that they can use. And so Also, while you're doing that, you want to show you care. You want to make it a special day. You want they're, getting some time out of school, or they're spending a Saturday or an evening with you, or whatever it may be, timing wise, that works for your parish, and you want to make it special. Excuse me. And so I usually start off, we have a welcome, and then I usually start off with some type of little activity that they can take back and use in their classroom with their students. Some type of a lesson or some type of project that they can do. I usually have a theme for my day that relates to our theme for the year. The theme relates to whatever our educational programming is that has been chosen by our advisory committee. And so whatever that educational programming is, I come up with a theme for the year, and then I pattern my day after that theme. And it just helps you to make it a little more special and relative to what they're going to be doing for the year in 4-H. This particular year, it happened to be the bare necessities. It was life skills for daily living. And so we did the Jungle Book, and like the project book, and related it that way. And so we started off the day with a little activity, a life skills activity that they could actually go back and do with their students. So it's something useful for them. And then of course you're going to always want to feed them some way, somehow, whether it's a morning meeting and you feed them breakfast, or it's beginning at lunch and you're going to feed them lunch, or if it's evening, you're going to feed them some dinner. Or I'm planning this summer to maybe meet with my current volunteers and maybe just do a dessert and coffee afternoon. So whatever timing it may be during the day for you, try to make sure that you're feeding them because they like that. And so I usually have a meal, and I also usually put candy out on the tables for them to have during the day. And I usually try to relate those back to my theme in some way. And then also the immediate engagement is what I was talking about. You're going to want to immediately engage them in something relating to your programming for the year, your theme, or 4-H overall, whatever it may be. Engage them somehow to where you start forming that relationship with them right off the bat, and making the day special for them. Okay, the foundation of the reason why we do what we do, as far as the day goes, is very important within the orientation step. And as you were looking at the orientation objectives or goals, these things are very fundamental, and they're the foundation for what we do, and so they need to be aware of those things. The purpose of 4-H, these are just some things that you want to make sure to try to cover. It's non-formal education, it's co-curricular, the fact that we are federally, state, and local funded, the development of life skills is what's very important throughout our 4-H programming, and they need to know that that's a real big focus. And so those are some things that you're going to want to make sure that you cover with them in the orientation portion of your day. Now, this design structure, basic organizational and 4-H information, name and emblem guidelines, because they can start off promoting stuff at their school, and so they're going to definitely need to know about those guidelines. Volunteer guidelines and risk management are all things that they're going to need to have information on. The Club Leader Handbook, the Louisiana 4-H Club Leader Handbook, is an excellent resource for all of these things. Within this PowerPoint, you can click on that Louisiana 4-H 2020 Club Leader Handbook, and the link will take you to where it's located on the LSU Ag Center website. And I'm sure that Ms. Megan will be sharing this, like she said, the PowerPoint with you, and you'll have access to that link as well. But within the Club Leader Handbook, you can find this information to be able to share. Here's an example of the table of contents. I have highlighted for you the areas of the handbook that definitely relate to the orientation portion. Inside 4-H, you know, you're going to want to cover some of that information, and then within that section of the Club Leader Handbook is the organizational structure, the mission, the vision, values, pledge, motto, the essential elements, experiential learning, the 4-H name, colors, and emblem. And then there's the club management section, but I go into that more so within the training portion of my day and throughout the year with my leaders. And so I do not have that portion highlighted because I'm strictly talking about orientation. And then down at the bottom, within volunteering, you can share with them the benefits of volunteering. Of course, the volunteer role descriptions are there for you to choose from that are going to relate to the volunteers that you're specifically working with that you're going to share. And then, of course, the Ag Center volunteer policy. And then, as we said, risk management guidelines are very important to share with them at this point. And so all of those things can be found in the Club Leader Handbook that you will have access to use for orientation. Now, I mentioned experiential learning. This is something that I always go over with my volunteers during my orientation, strictly because, and this is, I just came back from just had a conference about the Thrive model, and one of the comments made from one of the speakers was that, you know, a lot of times you would hear the comment, oh, well, they just play with kids. Well, we do not just play with kids. We have those valuable life skills that we are instilling into those children that we work with, but we have the research-based information to back up what we do, in that we use the experiential learning model for our programming. And so I make sure to share this with my volunteers so that they can see kind of, you know, there's a method to our madness. There's a reason why we do what we do, and it's based off of this research information and models. And so also the 4-H essential elements of positive youth development, I always go over that with them during orientation, because they need to be aware of what our goals are as far as, and objectives are as far as the programming that we do, and that we are wanting to make sure that we are covering those essential elements, and we are conducting positive youth development. And so again, research-based information that we are working from within our programming, and it's very intentional what we do, and to be able to instill those life skills and positive youth development. So I always share those that information during orientation. The blueprint, Megan has letters to leaders that are on the website, LSU Ag Center website, and there is a link down at the bottom of that list for access to the letters to leaders on the web. And some of those letters to leaders that I thought were very pertinent to the orientation portion of leader interaction is the What is 4-H leader letter. It would be very instrumental in sharing with your volunteers. And then also the how and why of experiential learning. As I said before, I always go over that with them. The role as a teacher and leader, facts about 4-H, and what do leaders do. Now, there are some other letters there that are very valuable. I just cover those more so with the training portion of my volunteer management rather than during orientation. And so these are the letters that I feel like relate well to the orientation area. And so those are some things to be able to look at as resources and be able to share with your volunteers. All right, do I have any questions from anyone? I know I went through that all very quickly. It is not something that is a very quick task as far as having your volunteer orientation and training. Like I said, we have ours in that afternoon, and this promotion is very important. Like I said, you send out a letter to the principals and to the volunteers about the training to have them attend, as well as reminders, as well as letting them know that there's going to be food and valuable information that they're going to need throughout the year. Also, we always have door prizes. That's something else that you can do to kind of promote the day. We get sponsors and donors to donate gifts, and we have a drawing with the volunteer leaders that attend and give out door prizes that day as well. And so it's a fun day for us. Now, as far as training goes, and I know you'll cover that in another session, but training, we begin the training that day as part of our day, but then continually throughout the year, we stay in contact with those volunteers to offer consistent training in different areas. And of course, we're always asking them what their needs are and things like that. So you would go from there. But as far as setting up your day for orientation, you'll decide what's best for your parish as far as timing and building your structure and design, and then building your agenda. From there, thinking about all of those important things you're going to want to make sure to include and want to make sure to cover in that orientation to make sure you've got a good fit with your volunteers for the program. So, any questions?
Nothing yet, but
Okay, great. Well, if anyone has any questions or would like more information later even, you can just email me. So, but I thank you all very much for having me.
thank you, Amanda. It was great. Sorry, I got some static. All right. So we're going to now move into a collaborative exercise. So we've created a series of breakout rooms, and we're going to work together to develop a volunteer orientation plan. So I'm going to share just real quick in the what it's going to look like. So I'm going to move you into breakout rooms, and we have created a series of folders or files rather in the volunteer development lunch and learn. So you'll see room 1 has a document, room 2, all the rooms that'll be working together have a template that they can use to develop that volunteer orientation plan. It's a very simple Word file. You can make it as creative as you want. And then we actually do have some small prizes for teams. And so we'll announce those after today in the recap email. We're going to review your guys' orientations and then tell you which one we thought was the best. So just give me one moment and I'm going to share that link in the chat. Again, because we got to do reflection and finish up. Somebody's typing fast. So we lost a bunch of folks, so we moved into breakout rooms, but that happens. So does anybody want to talk about their group's orientation activity? I can share it. Does anybody want to share for the group?
I can do ours since Miss Tanya was so gracious to type it all in. That would have taken me forever. So.
All right, I'm gonna share it real quick.
Okay.
And y'all were room 1, right?
And room 1 has our draft plan still up. I don't know if that's accessible.
Yep. You see it?
Yep,
Yeah.
there it is.
All right, I'm gonna mute my mic and let you tell us about it.
We just talked about that if we were able to do it during like their beginning of the year professional development, like call all the 4-H leaders together, you know, as a little meeting, that we could kind of make it short and sweet if we had a captive audience where they normally like they'll let them go and they got finally get to see their teacher friends again or whatever. So we were going to try and have it, you know, in the morning, icebreaker, question and answer session, and go over their job duties, have a little snack, have idea sharing, like service learning projects, all kind of programming shit, you know, what each school does kind of thing. And then local, state, and regional opportunities, including master volunteer, and then just talk about positive youth development using the experiential model, and then let them go eat lunch together, and we'll kind of be done with it.
Looks great. Amanda, do you have any comments on this one? They put it together in 15 minutes, so.
Well, and we
Looks
said we
great.
know that, like, this is a quick and dirty 3-hour session, but, you know, the majority of us don't like to be in meetings that have been dragged out and dragged out. And if we can get the bulk of what, you know, they're doing, the expectations, we have them, maybe a binder together with some other things, and then we've got, you know, communication set up. I think this is just a real good jumping off point for better communication as the school year starts. Because we all said sometimes we struggle to get them to even come to these things. And how do we change that?
And I wonder about that now, you know, with just because of the lack of in-person events this past year, you know, even you see it with like conference registration that's in person. I wonder if we'll have a lot more, you know, interest in in-person training because people just want to connect. But who knows? Maybe not. But it'll be interesting to see. But great job, teams. I know y'all didn't have a lot of time, so I appreciate everybody for working through these activities. We are almost out of time today. So what I'll do is I'll make sure to share these orientation plans in those resource folders that I'll recap for this session and for the lunch and learn so that you have access to them. I'm also going to share Amanda's helpful PowerPoint and then those additional resources that she talked about during her session today. And then if there's other materials that we need to have, you know, just feel free to reach out. We do have a volunteer training committee that works on materials, is in the process of redesigning all those online modules. You know, online modules, that's just a drop in the bucket for what we really need. So any ideas that you have, any resources that you need us to create to help you in your role, please feel free to reach out to me. Actually, Amanda's on that committee. I think there's several others as well. So we do have.
You just hanging yourself. I said you just hanging yourself out there for us.
I mean, that's my role. I'm a specialist. That's what I'm supposed to do for y'all. So just let me know what you need. All right, I'm going to share this certificate for y'all in the chat. I'm going to continue to do, so I had a request to move back to badging. I will do that. So if you do the certificate, I'm also going to start re-releasing the badges because that was preferred by some folks, and I get that. So I will do that. And give me one moment, and I will share the evaluation in the chat for all that want certificate or a badge. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any questions about summer camp, onboarding, dynamics, anything related to volunteers, enrollment screening, training, various things, jump on that virtual office hours. It's happening, right afterwards. And I'll jump on that call with y'all.